Different way of doing it. So we're looking at validity, we're looking at reliability, we're looking at how to put a decent study together. So let's look at some of the starting points. What is validity? It's quite a simple concept, really. It is saying the thing you're measuring, the thing you're studying, is what you think it is. Is it that hard? It is that simple. It gets muddy though, it gets messy, because you have to define your concept and be clear about how you define it. And the definition is key to your interpretation of whether your concept is valid. And there's some key and important parts to that. So if you are saying you're assessing body weight, then it's got to be a valid measure of body weight. In order to be able to do that, you've got to ensure that you actually are assessing the weight of the person. So they've got to take the clothes off, they've got to take the shoes off, they've got to take the things which will affect their body weight, their clothes, so it's an accurate measure. And that sounds very simple. That sounds really simple. And of course you can do that. If it's self-confidence, if it's mood, if it's emotion, you can't see those very clearly. You might think you're seeing someone who's confident, but they may be acting confident. You may think you're seeing someone who's calm, but they may be acting calm. You may see someone who's anxious, but they may want to show they're anxious, may want to show they're angry in order to orchestrate some change in others. It's good to show you're angry sometimes. Makes everyone scared of you. You tend to get your own way. Those of you with children would have that done by an angry 2-year-old who demonstrates their anger, and you cave in accordingly. I've done it. So validity. Define your concept. Define your concept. Think about, how do I measure that concept? Make the measurement very close to the definition. Be really clear on that. We will look at that, how validity and reliability interact, because again, it sounds simple, but it'll be more complicated than what you think. Reliability. What's all that about, reliability? We know when something's reliable. Get the same score twice, yeah? Get the same score twice. So if we wanted to measure our weight, we'd jump on the scales, find out they were beautifully slim. Oh, beautifully slim. And then we'd jump on the scales again and get the same score. Reliable. That would be the case. But there's certain things that relate to that to make that to make us know that that's a reliable measure. First is, we have a definition of reliability in this sense, a definition of weight, you should say. That means that we expect it to be the same score. So we measure our body weight. If the scales are reliable, we get the same score twice. Good. That's good. That should be simple. It should be so simple. If we get a different score, we could assume that the scales are not reliable. They're not reliable. We could check the validity of the scales, and we could check the reliability by putting some weight from the gym. If it's a 50 kilo weight, we should get 50 kilos on the scales. That would say it's a valid measure. If we put that on there twice, we get a reliable measure. Brilliant. Quite often people measure their weight twice and they assume that they've lost weight or they've gained weight. But it might be that the scales are not accurate, they're not reliable. They may have a 1 kilo variation. But we've defined our weight in that context as it being the same. If we expect our concept to change, to be transient, to be unstable, then we absolutely require as little error in the way that we measure our concept as possible. So if we've got if we've got a concept such as confidence can be quite stable, but it also can change. It can change quite quickly. If we've got a concept such as emotion, probably easier to understand how that changes so quickly, in that we can feel quite calm, and all of a sudden we can feel quite anxious. As we get closer to competition, the urge in nerves increases. Why do you think that the great queue for the loo before competition is something to do with the dodgy diets before competition? Possibly something in that, but more likely that it's nerves. It's the emotion of anxiety, the emotion of uncertainty, the preparation for competition. All of those things kick in to create your mental and physical preparation for performing. but it's transient, it changes. So how nervous you were a week before competition will be different to how nervous you are on the day of competition. If you're measuring that, you want to be able to detect such changes. It's important to detect such changes. And in order to do so, you're going to need a measure that's reliable. Reliable in this context would be to get the same score twice a week before, and then get the same score twice on the day of the contest. So in other words, it has changed in a meaningful way across the test-retest. Same for diet, same for weight. So weight should be transient, but if you weigh yourself, drink a pint of water, re-weigh yourself, you'll be a pound heavier. Don't think you put fat on, you put a pound heavier. Water carries weight. So reliable, define the concept. Is it transient? Is the concept you are assessing supposed to change? If it is supposed to change, expect there to be differences. But within that, you have to understand why there are going to be differences. And then from that, you have to say whether that difference is due to something in the environment. The person has drunk something, the person is more nervous, is more confident, has made a change in their behaviour. That's a meaningful change in their behaviour. They've got more confident, got fitter, got stronger, got faster. That's good. Or that there is some degree of error in the equipment. That's an issue. Who looked into the studies and thought, let's have a look at how they measured glucose. So we showed you how they measured glucose, all the details come out. We then dug into the error measurement of the equipment that's being used, and then looked at the size of the error measurement of the equipment being used in comparison to the differences pre and post the self-controlled tasks. So if you have an error measurement of, let's say, 10, let's just give some easy numbers, so in other words, when you test and retest anything, you get a score of 10. So if you test something and you get 50, if you get 60 or 40, kind of normal. That's because it's got an error measurement of 10. All equipment, anything you have, has got some error measurement in it. The idea is to reduce that to a negligible effect, so it means nothing. Whatever the number is you get, it means nothing. You can magnify numbers. You can centimeters or millimeters, in essence, of the same unit. 1 millimeters look bigger than centimeters, so we're just using simple numbers to illustrate the point. So you get an estimate of 10. So if the difference between your score is 10 and the error measurement is 10, you don't know if that is any meaningful change or just a normal variation in scores. You might find in a study that the score has shifted by 10, but you can't then be claiming that's a meaningful change, even if a majority of people seem to have dropped by 10, because your error measurement, your random error measurement in the equipment you're assessing, is saying that is a normal variation in errors. It's where the judgment, interpretation of your findings is absolutely key to making sense of it. So you can't just bung the numbers out, bung your stats out. Probability says it's significant, therefore we judge it. A lot of studies did that in the self-control is a muscle metaphor journey, and there's a lot of then evidence that said this is not necessarily the case. Not only because of the measurement error in the equipment, which was a major flaw in many ways going. It wasn't sensitive enough to detect the small differences, and then counter to that with some very nice articles. In fact, there's a very good article by a chap called Beedie and Lane, who looked at the concept from an ecological and evolutionary perspective, and the idea that if you're in an important situation, what your body does, it pumps energy into the system. So you are naturally pushing energy in. So at the point you're using energy, your body is preparing your body to use more energy. So any reduction needs to be thought through the idea that you are generating energy in as much that you're putting the energy for immediate use. And the second point, which is really important from an evolutionary perspective, if humans became depleted at rapidly losing, having to complete self-control tests, we probably wouldn't have survived, because we wouldn't have been able to repeatedly have active self-control, and in order to be able to survive, that wouldn't have been functional, and so it's an unplausible. But it illustrates the point very nicely of how the error measurement in the equipment that you're using is absolutely critical. I flip this back to psychology to just carry the story on, in that you need to recognise that where people are reporting how nervous they are, how confident they are, or any scale where there's self-report, the accuracy of that measurement is slightly better than a guess. Slightly better than a guess, because they have to introspect on their thoughts and present themselves with either language. So this isn't a qualitative quantitative issue, it's about the accuracy of being able to introspect and accurately present either your thoughts in terms of words, or your thoughts in terms of putting those feelings to numbers, which is what people do to questionnaires. In essence, it's the same. It is the same process, and the accuracy of both is influenced by your ability to accurately generate your thoughts and emotions of either of how you're feeling right now, or of past experiences. Again, we've done some really simple studies where we've looked at the accuracy of mood recall, and the idea that when you're in a certain emotional state, i.e. very intense emotional state, very anxious, very depressed, you tend to draw information from your own experiences that is consistent with that emotional state. So if you're anxious, what you'll find is you get a drill on the behind you, is that you tend to, how illustrated, is that you tend to report more anxiety. Anxiety in the moment. So if you've been anxious, you recall more anxiety. If you're calm, you don't recall so anxiety, even if it's the same experiences. So it affects it. So your measurement is affected by a whole variety of different things in that sense. Key, utterly key. Look to identify the error measurement in what you are measuring. It is not naught. There is some. That error measurement is a natural limitation of your research. However method you put together, you have error measurement. It's a limitation. Be upfront with that limitation. Don't try and hide it. Don't pretend it's not there. It's there. Just have it in there. Put it up front. It's why future research might want to do the uninteresting stuff that I like doing and try and limit that. You look at some of the work that Professor Neville and I have done on test-retest stability of self-report questionnaires. We love it. We've got right in there with plus and minus one. It's good. It shows that, and it's good. That's good. I mean, that sounds like, it's not the interesting sort of work. But if you want to have an intervention to work, you want to know it's meaningful. You want to actually be working and actually make a meaningful difference to people. Then get your measures so that they're meaningful. Setting up your research, you want to think through some of the threats that will occur to how accurate and useful is your study going to be. Now, the psychologist typically gets questionnaires, or they want to do interviews, and they're going to ask people questions. You ask them questions, and they're going to tell you answers. And think through who those people are and what the process is like for taking part in your study. Do you know what I do? In all the studies I've done, is I take part myself. I get the questionnaires that I'm planning to use, fill them out myself, and be really conscious of my thoughts as I'm filling that out. So I get the participant journey. So I might look at a study, I'm reading a study, and go, it's a very good, it's a very good study. And in my interpretation of the very good study is, I will be thinking through, what was it like to be a participant in this research? What the questionnaires look like? And then some of the studies, I know in some of the psychology studies, and they talk about a relationship between this variable, this concept, and the participants completed a 105 item questionnaire, and then they completed a 30 item questionnaire, and I'm thinking, oh my word. And I know, and you know too, that when you are asked to complete questionnaires and someone very nicely says, would you give us a minute of your time to take part in a study, and they look a friendly sort of type, and you go, yes, I shall give you a minute, and 10 minutes later you're halfway through page 3 of the questionnaire. When you looked at the questionnaire packet, it was it looked quite small, but the front page had big font in, and then you didn't realise that the questionnaire continued on every side of the paper, and the font got smaller, and you're starting to get a bit annoyed, and you're starting to get the response bias of ticking every question as fast as possible. We all do that. And so do we get meaningful answers? No, we don't. And so are you likely to get good data when the person is rapidly trying to finish whatever you're trying to do? If you ask them to take part in a fitness test and they're not really committed to the fitness test, will you get the sort of data you want? So when I look at studies, look at elite performance, say with physiology, I'm looking to see what were the lactate scores these people got to on a VO2 max test. Because I'm expecting them to be high. I'm expecting them to see that and go, oh yeah, they got a score of 7, 8. Which hurts. I did a VO2 on the rowing machine, and I got a personal best of lactate score of 17, and I can properly say that was proper agony. The cycling study I took part in, which was about emotion regulation, I got up to about 16 on that, which was proper agony. And if you look at that study, which is a Beedie, Lane and Wilson classic from 2012, it's a classic. Oh yes, it's a classic. The lactate scores are right up there, which says people took, and it says, and it's true because they looked in proper pain, people took that study seriously. So when they got properly angry from us deceiving them, they were properly angry, and they were properly angry in combination with working really hard. But if you want to study how people regulate their emotions when they're working hard, actually as they would do in real life, in a real life competition, then you've got to make it serious, haven't you? You've got to bring them into a study, make the study feasible, realistic, enjoyable, so that they want to take part. If your study is just an interview or just a questionnaire, and that questionnaire, we've done a lot, I've done a lot of these, is before competition, you've got to make the questionnaire so it's not going to be a torturous event for the person to do. In other words, it takes them no time whatsoever. So you've got to think very carefully. The message is go through the participant's journey so that you understand the process, so it's enjoyable enough for you to want to take part, because the quality of your data will be affected by that in a massive way. So I'm going to tell you a story. You don't know who that was an impression of. Nobody knows. The undergraduate, looked at self-efficacy in amateur boxers. I was an amateur boxer. I thought, yeah, I can do this. Go and get some box. I've got access to boxing coaches. They'll let me study their boxers in their gyms. And I was confident. I had high self-efficacy to do my study. So I developed my questionnaire. The questionnaire was okay. And then I went round to collect the data. So I contacted all the boxing clubs in London. So I lived in London at the time. And they let me in. That was great. 3 months later, I've been going around to boxing clubs 3 times a week. It's a lot of travelling. How many questionnaires have I got? 64. Very difficult. Boxing clubs do not have hundreds of boxers in them. I didn't have then in the early 1990s. Yes, I had that. So we got 64, and I put a criteria. They had to be fighting. That was good, because you want people to you need serious boxers to estimate their confidence to win the next fight, to achieve their season's goals. They need to have been in the ring to actually experience the anxiety, because emotional control is part of the question. They needed to be experienced. 64 is really hard work. It took me a lot of time to do that. A lot of organising, a lot of phone calls. It was difficult. My MSc, I thought, I've smartened up on this. We'll collect the data in triathlon. And I thought, I'm really smart on this one. I'm using a questionnaire called the Competitive State Anxiety Inventory 2, the latest questionnaire by Rainer Martins. I own the red book, which gave me great power at the time. Knowledge. Who's the red book? So we're looking at anxiety prior to competition. I contacted the organisers of the British Triathlon Championships. I said, don't worry, do not worry. Starting to do like Boris Johnson, do not worry, we've got this covered. So they put my questionnaire in the pack for everybody at the registration with instructions to fill the questionnaire out and pop it in the box as they came to register their bikes and have their numbers put on the next morning. I thought, perfect. 2,000 questionnaires go out. 2,000! I thought, this is fantastic. All the boxing stuff. What an amateur I was there. I thought I cracked it. So I go to collect my questionnaires later in the day. 17. Lesson there. The questionnaire was torturous. A lot of the people who I knew gave me feedback on that, and here's a lesson. I should have asked them beforehand. What will filling this look like? And they said the questionnaire was torturous. You had this anxiety questionnaire that said how nervous was I, and then you had a next bit which says, is that good or bad? We don't know what to write for that. So the questionnaire was quite hard to interpret. It was quite hard to interpret. The moment through when people were going to complete it was meant to be quite close to competition. That was not a great time within triathlon where they're pumping bikes up, pumping tyres on bikes. They're not pumping bikes. You pump your bike up. You want your tyres of your bike up. Getting the numbers drawn on them, some getting their wetsuits on, and all the bits of shenanigans going on. So they needed somebody to actually administer the questionnaire in a really quick way. The questionnaire was too long, too many words, too awkward, and it didn't suit them. There was never a moment in their mind that said, "Oh, I'll fill in this questionnaire right now," it wasn't that they didn't want to. They'd been awkward. It was that completing the questionnaire was not one of their important goals. So they didn't do it. And they would have done it. They were not unfriendly. And you will find this out, that when people say, "Yeah, I'll fill out your questionnaire," and they'll take it away, or leave it on the desk and we'll get everyone to complete it. Likely is the story, you'll get far fewer than what you wish. So I learnt from being my wife's research assistant. She would for her MSc. I was the man. I am still a man, but I was definitely the man with the bag of pens, because we went down to the supermarket. The 1994 version of Poundland in Hounslow, bought hundreds of felt tip pens, because if you're going to correct the questionnaire in the field, you need pens that write uphill, downhill, without having to lean on anything. We had loads of felt. We had at least a fiver's worth of felt tip pens in order to be able to do this study. We had a questionnaire that was only 27 items, really short. And we wandered around a sporting event where in one day we asked people to report their mood. How anxious are you? How alert are you? How nervous are you? How happy? Happy wasn't one of the items, actually. How active are you? And people looked at it and went, here's your questionnaire back. Bosh. Over 1,000 in very, very little effort. What's the lesson there? Pick a method that people, when they look at it and you say, can I have a minute of your time? It's clear that it is a minute. It looks easy to do, and therefore you will get the compliance you want from that in a study of that design. Or the cycling study, make it worthwhile to people. We gave people through a torturous study, and then we spent a lot of time with them to talk them through their results, to talk them through interventions to try and help them get better, so that they understood about their emotion regulation, about how these thoughts and feelings affect their performance in future. We've done that in several studies where you recruit people with the explicit intention to give them something back to make it worthwhile to them. Although I have tried money. Money doesn't bring that many people in, because when you're doing it for the money, you might not be doing it for the right reasons. Can use incentives, but we have in a very sense, when the person says doing this study will be an educational, worthwhile for me, then it's quite useful. And you can do that in your studies if you think very carefully about the applied nature of what you're about to do, about the variables you're about to do, the design of what you're going to do, so that people get something worthwhile from that. So conclusion. Think about the validity of your measures. Get them so that they are assessing what you think they're assessing. Think about the reliability of the measures that you are using. Is there random error? Is there error measurement? What is that? What is it? Identify it and understand it. Identify it as a limitation. Set out the study so that participants want to take part in it, and so that the experience of taking part isn't torturous, so that they don't give you meaningful responses or find it enjoyable and worthwhile. You can design it. It's up to you. Create the study so that people want to take part in it, so that you get yourself useful data. Because if you do that, you will get a study that's quite useful. And if you do that, you could become famous. So on that basis, I'll gallop off.